Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Conversations in the Future of Work. I am your host, Rachel Cossar, and I am thrilled to be focusing this session on the PR and communications space. And we'll have a very special focus on how AI is coming into that space, disrupting it or elevating it, what to be aware of. And then, of course, if you are a small business or startup CEO, founder, owner, we'll be touching on some of the things you can think about when you're early on in that company's journey. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, the incredible Lori Sussle Bonanni. So if you want to just quickly introduce yourself, Lori, and share with our audience some of the main facts.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for having me. So I am the founder and communications consultant of ELSIS, which is a multidisciplined communications consultancy. I say that I build and grow companies' reputations to increase awareness, business results, and credibility. And based on my background, I have nicknamed myself a non-traditional publicist, and I partner with companies as early as fast-growing funded startups and established as Global 500s.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're so excited to have you on the show. And selfishly, I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I am in that kind of early startup stage. And PR has just like always been one of those things that I struggle with. So bringing our first question in, what's your advice for how small business owners and founders should be thinking about their communication strategy?
Sure. So I love this question because most people are like, I want to be on the New York Times. And it's like, well, first you have to build that. So one of my visual explanations of this is a roller coaster. So as you're going up the roller coaster, you're slow and steady. So that's building your thought leadership, right? Who are you? Why do people want to hear from you? Are you writing on your company blog? Are you posting on LinkedIn and other socials? Are you getting quoted in some publications that are relevant to your industry? Just slow and steady. We're not looking for nobody. You might not have news at this point. It's just who are you and why are you an expert? And that can come in many different ways. Then you get to the top and you have some kind of news to drop eventually, right? You're launching, you're announcing a funding round announcement. You have some kind of news, like you can answer the question, why will people care? That if that can get answered and it's truly newsworthy, you're dropping your news. And then you are going to maintain that momentum as you go down the roller coaster, right? How can you keep that momentum up? Because if somebody's Googling your company, whether it's a potential partner, a potential client, a potential employee, and that news that you launched was 3-4 years ago and there hasn't been anything with your company since, what does that look like? It sort of looks like you haven't really maintained that momentum. So initially, I would say that, what is the purpose and values of your company? Why are you, mission, vision, values, and all of that, and understanding who your audience is. We talk all the time, and is your message resonating with your targeted audience? And not only is it resonating, is it reaching them? So understanding that. And one of the things I find with a lot of founders and small business owners is they want to be on every platform. And every platform is great if you can handle it, but wouldn't you rather be really great at one thing than like mediocre at a lot of things? And so really narrowing down, where is your audience? And you don't need to be on the newest, latest channel just because you think you should. Is there a business reason and a business case for that? And that's something that I help companies decide, what makes the most sense. Because the other piece is consistency. If you're going to have channels and you're going to be posting and it's so far and few between, does it make sense for you to be on that channel? Totally understand people want to have that channel and secure their name, and that's all great, but direct people to where you really are having that conversation.
Right. Those are such good points. I find, with our own journey, your point about like, where are you getting the most resonance according to the channel is a really good one, because it's very tempting to just be blasting content out on all of these different social media oriented channels. We at Virtual Sapiens are very much B2B focused.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn has been our most powerful social media specifically outlet. And, so we've just been doubling down on that one. But it's tempting to be like, well, maybe we should be trying TikTok and Instagram and we did try them, but it became pretty obvious pretty quickly, almost in like a validating way. Like, this isn't where your audience is.
Yeah. And I am also B2B. So the LinkedIn for me is really where it's at. And I think it's a conversation for another day, but Twitter in its former form was also somewhere that was helpful for me to be. But I'm a writer. So to me, being on Instagram with visual content doesn't make a ton of sense. So thinking that through for different companies is really the first piece of it. Because
Right.
Somebody's like, well, we should be there because everybody's there, but who's everybody? Because you want your customer, you want your potential partner. And I've followed companies that are on different channels, and it should be different content, or at least a mix of them. And instead it's just the same content repurposed. And that's not really going to help move the needle either, because if you have people who are on different channels, they might be there for different reasons, right?
Right.
But then going back to the question about communication strategy, the other piece is, being adaptable, right? Like what's working, what's not. You have to be really nimble about that, and you can figure out really fast what's working. And so I think in terms of that strategy, just having that roller coaster analogy kind of breaks up the pieces of, where are you communicating, and it's not all at once, right? Like that slow and steady can take some time, and you might not have that news to announce,
right?
Because nobody writes about you because you exist. That's called advertising, and so it depends where you want to spend your money.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So thinking about, like, it sounds like, right, especially on that beginning early part of the roller coaster, right, there's a lot of work that companies and founders can and should be doing themselves. But at what point do you think it makes sense to maybe start investing in support when it comes to some of this PR work?
Oh, it's going to differ, but I would say I have worked with companies that are so super early, getting everything organized and ready for a full-time hire to take over, has been one avenue. Another avenue is me personally. I offer like this power hour, kind of building you a to-do list, an actionable to-do list that you could either hire someone much less expensive, but they have a plan to go after, or break it up among your founding team. And I've done that before, and I've built the strategy for clients, and then they go and execute it. So more of a DIY approach, but having an actionable to-do list, not just, oh yeah, you should post on LinkedIn. It's like very specific, and it takes into account, answers to a questionnaire and conversations. And then the other time is when you actually have news, right? So there's a lot of pieces that go into dropping that news. And so when you are launching a product or service, you should be looping in your communications team early on, not, oh, we've got everything ready to go, we're launching next week. Because there's a lot of work that can be done on the back end to help secure that press. But I would say, to answer this specifically, what conditions, I would say launching a product or service, handling a crisis, which we can talk a little more about, if you've secured funding or any kind of investment, even milestones or industry thought leadership. Are you looking to be placed in different outlets? Maybe you don't have news, but you have, hey, I've written these, pieces, and I've got like a series, and I don't want it just on my LinkedIn or my website speaking to my echo chamber. I want to expand that audience.
Right.
But also, if you're targeting a specific audience, how do you get into industry publications, national publications, all of that? And, if you don't have a comms team, or you have a marketing team of one or two, thinking small businesses and startups, having that extra, brain power on your team to take things off of your plate or to put things on a plate that people are not already qualified to do, or
Mhm.
just don't have the bandwidth for.
Yeah.
But certainly investing in PR isn't just, hey, we have an announcement, let's do it, which certainly is a piece of it. But there's a lot that could be built up in advance of that announcement, and comms is usually brought in too late. So I would give it at least,
Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks before you want to do something. You don't need to have the engagement that long, but at least to be thinking about, okay, we are spending all this time and effort on launching it.
Yeah.
How do we launch it to people that aren't already in our echo chamber?
Totally. That's man, it's such a hard I feel like it's really hard to know how to get beyond your own, as you say, echo chamber. One of the other questions I had about this specifically is like, we'll be reached out to frequently with these like pay to play opportunities, and like we're absolutely not going to do that. But like, what do you think about those? Is that like, what do you think about all those?
Be very careful. So, so I think a good example is this, and I will say this: there is a time and a place for a press release newswire, like a press release to go on a newswire.
Yeah.
There is absolutely a time and a place. A public company making an announcement, financials, whatever, and it's great for SEO. However, and I will age and date myself right now. You used to send press releases on fax machines, and somebody would be at the other end and getting the faxes of the press releases. And then, a journalist would be like, oh, I'm going to write about this one, or I'm going to write about this one.
Mm-hmm.
Now it obviously comes to an inbox and they just get posted, right? Nobody is sitting and reading Business Wire or PR Newswire or any of these other smaller newswires. Nobody in your industry is just sitting there like, what might come up on the wire today?
Right.
They're reading publications in their industry. And while it does sound overwhelming and like, how do I get it into these? It's just easier on the wire. When you are putting stuff on the newswire, it's going onto websites that might be temporary. They're going onto sites that post every press release. So there's a time and a place, yes. And would I recommend it as the first way to get your news out? No. And so that is very much pay to play in a different sense of it. But wouldn't you rather see your article in an industry publication or a national publication where potential customers are actually reading, your potential employees? And so it hurts my heart when I see somebody like announcing, a new product or service or new geography or a partnership or some kind of collaboration or anything. It hurts when I see, and it's like a newswire release they're sharing, because there's so much out there in terms of targeted pitching that could really make and move the needle,
Right.
to make the difference for you. But to answer the pay to play, there's a time and a place is the best answer. And I would vet it really well. And I would see where that lands. Does it get you high up on Google? Is it worthy,
Yeah.
for you to be on? Like the big thing, I learned a long time ago, right? You're judged by the company you keep. And, when you land that pay to play feature, where is it? And does it look like somewhere you want to be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for startup founders, it's also really tempting to like try to be placed on these like lists, and I think you're absolutely right that the questions one should be asking are really like, first of all, who is even paying attention to this list?
Yeah.
And who else is on the list? And because at the end of the day, like these things take time out of your day, and you, as is like the leader of a company like this, you just don't really have time to be wasting on something that's going to be low ROI, or it could be potentially a little damaging to your presence, right? Like, cause if people like know that that's a bogus site and you're just like, yay, look at me, people are like, oh, this person like is not paying attention.
Yeah. Well, and like I've gotten invite. I mean, I could give you a laundry list of the things, here, come speak at this phenomenal conference
Yeah.
in, wherever, and it's, $8,000 to be considered, or, here's this really cool article and you'll be on this site and it's like it's been dormant for 6 months. Like,
Totally.
just really knowing what that looks like. And so when my clients send me these things all the time, like, is this something we should do? And I'm like, I don't want to pop your bubble, but no, we shouldn't.
Yeah. Totally. No, that's so
If
good
you
to
want to
know.
spend money, these are my recommendations. Like,
Yeah, totally. So we talked about this, like you're ramping up, you're spending the right amount of time and focus, really building your brand and your thought leadership. But let's say like you do want some of the top media outlets' attention. Like, is there a way to do that well, or is it just kind of what they're looking for at the time?
so remember when I said a little bit ago about, when you launch, you want that 6 to 8 week runway to
Mm-hmm.
think about, to bring somebody in comms on. So, what is the headline? What is your target audience? Who are the reporters that write about this? What is your pitch? Why do people care? Like, I do that a lot with clients. Like, oh, you want me to pitch this? Like, so what? Tell me why. Why would people care? But also knowing who that journalist is. And I mean, we're recording this before this goes live, but there has been, pretty much, journalists have been essentially, there's been massive layoffs, right? And so the journalists that you think you may have been reaching out to on their beat, they might not be there. So really staying up on where people are landing, where they're going, has their beat changed, is
Mm-hmm.
really important, because I've secured, media in Forbes, and I have contacts at Forbes. I'm using this as an example. And so I have gotten media placed about healthcare and entertainment. So if you come to me, I guess health tech and entertainment, but if you come to me with a CPG brand, yeah, I've gotten coverage in Forbes, but those aren't the reporters that are going to write about it. It's not like, oh, well, that's not your beat, but can you do me a favor and write about it anyway? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like,
Right.
find that reporter that writes about it and then pitch that reporter, because they'll care.
Right.
And so capturing the media's attention, I would say the number one thing is make sure you find the right reporter, the right journalist. That would be the first thing. And, knowing who your target audiences, but also knowing that, you're not going to be able to read the article before it goes live. You're not going to be able to do any of that. And I get asked that all the time, but it's earned media, like, it's not paid. And so you have to trust that that story is going to be written, with the information that you gave, and that's how it's going to be reported. It's not exactly, it's not advertising, so it's not totally in your hands. And so understanding that and thinking about all the ways to capture attention. One of the examples I give a lot is like a hub and spoke model. So let's say you have a food brand and that's in the middle of the hub, and you're pitching food magazines, food publications, food writers. But let's talk about, each spoke. So is there something cool about your manufacturing process? Well, now you can go into like supply chain and manufacturing publications. Is there something healthy about it? Now you can go into health magazines. Does it travel well? Now you can be in publications around tourism and travel. And how does that, things to pack, for your next flight? And, is it kid friendly? Now you can get into parenting magazines. Are there cool partnerships? What supermarkets might you be in? What does that look like? And so you've now expanded, just going from, CPG and consumer publications, to now you're expanding it to supply chain, manufacturing, travel, so that audience really can vary. And so to capture the media's attention, you're not going to write the same pitch for a supply chain reporter as you are going to for like a general consumer interest story.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
making sure that your pitch aligns and you're not just, copy pasting the pitches, because it's different for each audience.
Right. But so in that case, in that sense, if you're doing your research, you're making sure that your messaging is aligned to the person within that publication who's most likely to be interested. Submitting those proposals is can work. Like it's not like they just sometimes it feels like they go into these voids, but it must like do those actually work?
Yes, yes. Well, when I work with different brands, sometimes they overlap and sometimes it's the same journalist and
Yeah.
sometimes it's totally a new, it might be a new geography. It might be, yeah, well, I work with a lot of technology companies, but am I going to write to the same reporter that covers SaaS as I am for hardware? Like
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
going to be different.
Yeah.
So, as long as you have a good solid pitch that's relevant to that journalist,
Right.
then it's up to what's breaking, what's on their plate. Are they still at that company?
Yeah.
Are they on vacation? Is there, another breaking story? And there's other things that, could happen to push it. But if you know that what you've written is solid and in their inbox, it might not be tomorrow that you get a response, but maybe for a story later. That's happened before. I've pitched people and then they've never even reached out, and then I see them in a roundup story later. I had a client that
Huh.
I had landed a lot of press for on a Series A funding announcement, and they were in menopause and sexual health space. And a couple weeks after that, and one of the publications, they announced the raise, and there's a couple of great articles. And then a couple weeks later in TechCrunch, they were writing about menopause startups and why they're not getting funded. And
Mm,
the company that I mentioned was in there. And so my pitch was good enough. They didn't even need to reach out for more information. They were able
right.
to include enough in that roundup. So sometimes you could be surprised too.
Wow. Well, that's very inspiring.
Yes.
Now let's move on to the last question here,
Sure.
right? Which is interesting because I mean, AI has been affecting every industry differently, and
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how is AI being applied and used within this space, and then
Mhm.
what are some things people should be aware of, either in their capacity as a startup founder or a small business owner who's looking to leverage some PR, but maybe is looking at AI. Like, what is going on with AI in PR comms?
Well, excuse me, as a writer, I have been um, given a lot of writing that is very clearly AI. So I would definitely um, know that it's being used, maybe to write pitches or emails or whatever. But how personalized is it? Like, take a look at it before you send it, because that customization is huge. So, and you can also tell, you know, I as a writer can tell if something has been written by AI, but journalists certainly can, and they have, things that they can run everything through. So I think from writing, that's a big one. Obviously there's chat bots, for inquiries and customer service. There's some social media listening, what they're doing, and translation and different languages, um, speech and image recognition. So there's lots of ways that AI is being used. And while I do think it will be applied positively, there's a lot. And I'm a member of the PRSA, which is the Public Relations Society of America, and they recently released a report that was fascinating, all about the ethics of AI. And so I think there's going to be a lot coming out of that as it evolves. And I think, for brainstorming, for, um, drafting things, I think it could be useful. But I find more
Right.
often than not, if I put something in and I'm plopping it in and trying to play with it, it's like I need to rewrite it. But I'm also coming as a writer, right? So to
Yeah.
me, um, I know what I'm capable of. And, sometimes for writing's not people's thing, right? Like it's
Yeah.
almost like I'm not great at math. And so, I'm going to use a calculator, right?
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that, different AI algorithms are coming into SaaS products that are in the PR space. And so still testing some things out. So I am intrigued to see how it evolves and comes up with these efficiencies, knowing that there's still a need for this personalized communication. And I think, on the journalist side, something that's really huge is, AI, the one thing it can't do is interview, right? And so when I'm writing, when a journalist is writing, a lot of that comes from like crafted questions that follow a conversation and, bring out some more information from the source. And so I think that is, it will evolve, but I just don't think it's there yet.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think, at least in my experience, AI can be helpful if you are looking for kind of a quantity of ideas, but almost always as like a point of curiosity, like a jumping off point of curiosity, which you would then take and hone and really make your own or inspire into something that you might,
Yeah, for sure. Like, I feel like if I, for example, ask it, give me a couple of, topics on this that could be explored, and, it's gives me headlines or whatever. And I always find that, like, if I never have found something that I'm like, oh, I want to use that, but it, gets the mind turning. Like, what else could you use? Or, oh, well, that's no good, but, something like this could be. And,
right.
and so thinking about that, but I think, a lot remains to be seen, and the ethics around it will be interesting.
Absolutely.
Who owns what?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Lori, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing so much super useful feedback in terms of understanding this space and the timeline and the effort that really goes into it. Would you mind sharing with our audience how they can get in touch with you if you have a power hour schedule that they can be aware of?
Sure. So I can be reached through my website, elss.com, which is ELSS, like SamUS.com. I can also be reached on LinkedIn, Lori Sussle Bonanni. And if you go on my website and services, you can click down and there is Power Hour. And I help you with a clear roadmap with action items that you can start doing immediately. But I would say, going back to where are you on socials? And I would say LinkedIn is definitely where I am. And if you reach out, just let me know that you saw me here so I can make the connection. And I look forward to hearing from your listeners.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. And of course, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Lori, I'll see you in the green room.
Thank you.